Hello, welcome to Simracing Corner. In this video we're going to compare the force feedback between the Thrustmaster TX and the Bodnar SimSteering 2 Advanced Force Feedback System. Of course, this is not a fair contest, so don't berate me in the comments straight away. Just hear me out for the next couple of minutes. I'm fully aware this is the equivalent of a lightweight going up against a heavyweight boxer. The purpose of what we are doing is to give sim racers out there a practical idea of the differences you can expect between a belt-driven and a direct drive wheelbase. Specifically observing force feedback effects and the experience of using these wheels across a few different games. So, if you've been running a non-direct drive wheel for some time, you may be considering stepping up to one of these more powerful wheelbases. More likely an OSW, which is far more affordable than the Bodnar SimSteering 2 that I'm using, and an OSW will still give you an equivalent experience to my setup. Certainly it's still a hefty investment. An OSW typically costs around £800, and the Thrustmaster TX base without the wheel or pedals is about £220. So that's about 3.5 times more expensive. An OSW doesn't include a wheel or pedal set, so stripping back the Thrustmaster to just the cost of the base alone makes it a fair price comparison. So let's drop into a few games and I'll talk you through the events. Hopefully the way I've recorded and edited this together is going to show you the differences and how the force feedback between the wheelbases is influencing my wheel inputs, because I'm reacting not only to what I'm seeing on the screen, but also the force feedback directly, which is helping me understand the motion of the car and the amount of available grip. In the bottom left, you can see the active wheel along with the gameplay footage, and the smaller inset picture is the other wheelbase in action on the same track, just for a side-by-side comparative, and we'll flip between recorded gameplay throughout the commentary. We're starting things off with Project Cars 2 and the Thrustmaster TX wheelbase. With this wheelbase I was getting plenty of detailed effects coming from Project Cars 2. I was quite impressed. It was a positive start to our tests. The force feedback cues while driving this Formula Renault were clear and informative, along with some canned effects which add variety and immersion. It gave me a confident feel that allowed me to push the car within its limits and catch slides when I needed to, but what I would have liked is stronger resistance of the tyres during cornering. But the strength of the motor in the Thrustmaster TX wheelbase has its limits, and it's very easy to overpower the motor and push past its maximum resistance. Personally, I would have liked the force feedback strength to be at least double the maximum this TX base was able to output. For reference, I'd say I run my direct drive motor force feedback about 3 times the strength of the Thrustmaster TX wheelbase, I'd guess, maybe a little more. So it's quite a difference, and that's nowhere near 100% of the power that this direct drive motor is able to produce. I'm running force feedback at about 40% in most titles, so it has a lot to spare if I need it. A more powerful direct drive motor doesn't just mean greater resistance, it also means a more detailed force feedback effects, and some fine effects you won't ever feel through the TX wheelbase, or indeed any belt-driven wheelbase. Belt-driven wheelbases dampen some effects, no matter how powerful they are. The fact they are using belts and cogs to transfer the force feedback mechanically dampens the effects, and there's no way around that. Where the direct drive wheel has a big advantage is being able to translate small incidental bumps and cracks in the road surface from any laser scanned track. It's quite amazing how many layered effects some titles are outputting at the same time, which can be felt through our direct drive powered wheel, but are completely absent using the Thrustmaster TX. And this nicely leads us onto Automobilista. This game has incredible nuanced force feedback effects. It's very different from the other titles I've tested today. It doesn't have engine noise or tyre screeching effects coming through the force feedback. It's a more pure force feedback effects you're getting with this game, doing an amazing job communicating the continuous changing grip levels between the tyres and the road surface. Things like the weight distribution on the vehicle moving around and compressing the suspension, which organically alters the grip between the 4 corners. and other stresses during motion that influence how well your car is planted. This all comes through the force feedback in a quite amazing way in Automobilista. On our direct drive wheel, it's quite exquisite. You get into a zen-like state as you intuitively feel your way around the track through the force feedback. Nothing beats this. It's quite perfect. Automobilista nails force feedback. There's no doubt about that. Now onto the Thrustmaster TX. Well, it's not so great, sadly. The force feedback felt plain and lacking the fine detail. My conclusion is because Automobilista's force feedback effects can be quite subtle, and the TX motor doesn't have the ability to communicate through those lighter subtle effects. It left the force feedback feeling a little bland. It also made tackling tight corners in this powerful car more tricky, as I wasn't feeling particular force feedback effects I relied on to fully understand the behaviour of the car at all times. And it led me to spin out when I was applying too much throttle input. On the direct drive wheel, the dynamic effects continuously communicated clear detail in the same situations. And I fully understood what was happening when I began pushing too hard, giving me an opportunity to ease off. When on the Thrustmaster TX, I wasn't getting these indicators through the force feedback. So I had to take a slightly more conservative approach in some corners, and it's just having to adjust a little to avoid mistakes. So I can still drive the track just by applying a different approach. Being able to be more consistent using a direct drive wheel is something you may hear mentioned in reviews that compare direct drive wheels to belt-driven wheels. And what we've just covered is a good example of that meaning. Having this higher level of force feedback detail gives you more advanced notice of situations before they get out of hand, allowing you to make adjustments to your inputs. And it goes without saying, this is a major advantage in favour of our direct drive wheel. So we're now on to kartcraft. On the Thrustmaster TX, the feeling of the tyre grip came through the force feedback very well, and the overall force feedback strength was quite decent. Though I would have preferred more strength from the motor, but it was still satisfactory. In fact, during this recording I posted faster time trial laps than I was able to run with the direct drive wheel in the past, and I've put quite a few laps down on the LAB Bodnar. On this Thrustmaster setup I blitzed it within a few laps and climbed 70 places on the global leaderboard, so go figure that. I do run the direct drive wheel at quite a strong force feedback setting in this game, and it's shown to have a negative effect on my lap times. So there you go, too much of a good thing can be bad. But I must admit I really do enjoy fighting the realistic force feedback on my direct drive wheel in kartcraft. It's quite a battle and quite tiring, but enormous fun. On to our final game, Assetto Corsa Competition Zone. It's still in early access right now, and Kunos have tweaked the force feedback in some of the updates, so my comments in this video may not stand up to the test of time, as it's quite possible Kunos will update the force feedback even further upon release. But I'll describe to you how it feels to me as it stands in the 6.0 update at this time. The force feedback effects in ACC are adequate, not spectacular. You feel a sense of grip by the way of the tension of the wheel resistance changing as the car moves around the track. It has a slight rubbery feel to it, I think. So yeah, there's a limited range of overall effects. You feel the curbs and bumping other cars, etc. But there's nothing really of particular note beyond that. And both the Thrustmaster and LAB Bodnar gave very much the same impression. We just had a stronger level of these effects on the direct drive wheel. But even when the force feedback isn't really impressive, the direct drive motor will at least extract the most out of these effects in any given game. So ACC's force feedback gets the job done. It communicates enough to aid driving, but isn't going to win any awards. So I think we'll leave things there. Okay, let's move on to the summary. Trying to describe force feedback sensations in a meaningful way in a video is actually very difficult, but hopefully there's something here that helps give you some vague impression, at least. Really, the only way to really know is to use the hardware, and things should become quite clear when reviewed against my descriptions. Overall, the Thrustmaster TX performed well and better than I expected. It's actually not my wheel, it's borrowed specifically for making this video and a future one which will come up soon after this one. The Thrustmaster TX was smooth, quiet, and the force feedback effects that came through were very nice. My only gripe is it wasn't powerful enough for my personal taste. But I've been spoilt using a direct drive wheel for the past few years, so that's no real surprise. Before owning the Leo Bodnar unit, my previous wheelbase was a Fanatec CSW 2.5. But again, it utilises belts and cogs to transfer force feedback through to the steering column. And it had the same issue of damping the fine granular force feedback effects. It's something I still remember when I shifted over to the Leo Bodnar and experiencing the additional effects for the first time in my Sims. But I certainly had certain expectations when I spent this much money. And so yeah, it was exactly what I had hoped for, and I'm glad it did. One common question is, does a direct drive wheel make you faster? Well, I don't think it gives you an advantage in that way exactly. But it does grant you better car control in sticky situations or particular cars that can be quite twitchy. As you feel crisper and more detailed effects, you can push harder and you have a more effective feeling of the limitation of the grip at any given moment. But that can also lead to overdriving the car, which can be counterproductive for fast lap times, even if it does feel more badass at the time. And I must admit it's something I suffer from doing, but one must conclude a direct drive wheel can contribute to fast lap times if used correctly. For me, using a direct drive wheel is a more enjoyable experience. I like the fact the force feedback has a potential to overpower me. Having to fight with the controls can be wild and a lot of fun. Chucking a car around the bumps and elevations of Nordschleife is amazing, and it's experiences like that that bring out the best out of a direct drive wheel. Also, rally games are pretty awesome too. Let's talk about value for money. Is an OSW direct drive wheel worth paying 3.5 times more than the Thrustmaster TX wheelbase? Yes, I really think it is. If you're a fully committed sim racer who's going to be spending hours per week using it, I think you're going to get your money's worth and you're going to enjoy it for many years to come. But what about a more premium wheelbase in the belt-driven arena, like the Fanatec CSW 2.5? That's roughly half the price of an OSW, and yep, there's no doubt that's also very good. But again, a direct drive wheel will totally obliterate the Fanatec CSW in every way. If you're into your sim racing big time and have the disposable income, it's an investment you won't regret, honestly. It's fundamentally the most immersive and exciting way to experience sim racing. Okay, let's finish things off here. If you want to contribute to the discussion, please drop a comment in. I'd love to hear your opinions. And if you found this video useful and maybe even entertaining, please hit the like to help the channel and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Well, thanks for watching as usual. Stay tuned and we'll have more videos for you very soon. So take care, happy simming, and bye bye for now.